Hi, and welcome back to Plan9Crunch. I'm Joe Gibson, and today, because I was indeed able to get my hands on Volume 2 before it went back out of stock on Amazon, I am once more taking a look at Matt Frank's Redman The Kaiju Hunter comic. If you missed my first video on the subject, I laid out the groundwork, well, some of it, for what this comic actually is, because it really is quite interesting how it emerges from the intersection of kaiju trivia and public perception. You can follow the links to find that original video, but suffice it to say that Redman is what happens when you take Ultraman and remove all the context aside from the monster battle. In so doing, you create the most prolific kaiju serial killer to date, as we focused on last time. But this time I want to focus on the inherent tragedy to at least Matt Frank's synthesis of the low-budget show with the iconic meme. Redman is stuck in this unfulfilling televised status quo at the whims of the alien Takeda people, specifically the show's creator, and this issue shows Redman realizing this and taking steps, literally more than figuratively, that lead him to confronting this creator, who still only makes himself known to Redman and us through a speech, a monologue, about how this will not really end. So it's the Truman Show. I debated how far I could get into the video with just teasing the topic I'm putting on the thumbnail, but it's easier to just acknowledge it now and wrap around to the finer point of this comparison, and also its limitations after a couple tangents. Tangent 1. Part of the appeal of comic collecting, as far as I can understand, is issues with variant cover art. As you can see, my volume here has the creatures from Volume 1, specifically Earthtron/Arstron and Jiras, and Gudon, who I called Gubila last time. I'm happy to have a cover that has Jiras on it, but I also cannot fathom collecting multiple copies of the same rare comic just to hoard Redman cover art. Now, with the contemporary kaiju comics getting wide release, like the Justice League vs. Godzilla vs. Kong, I prefer to collect those in the hardback volumes anyway, which severely limits the amount of cover options. But for individual issues, I have considered only certain covers and not others. Still, I was taught not to judge a book by its cover. So to more effectively and efficiently collect comics, I'll have to unlearn a few things. Tangent 2, even though I spent a significant, considerable amount of time looking into the comics that interest me, I still struggle sometimes to interpret frames and come to the author's intended conclusion. Without other people's commentary, I would not have grasped that the monsters come back to life every time they die, and thus that is why Canagon looks like that towards the end of his red fight. That's a reference technically to the Canagon suit warping into a design like that in Redman episode 19, but I just assumed it was another Canagon and not the same horribly mangled resurrected being. Similarly, the fight against Stegon that starts this volume features a purple-looking Redman. Let's find a good page spread here. And I guess the explanation is that, akin to the later Shin Ultraman, in lieu of a color timer, Redman's whole body drains of color when his energy is low. Neat. And now, because this volume ends with the Redman Dark, an identical Shadow Redman, my first thought was that this purple Redman was that very same doppelganger introduced here for symmetry and bookending in the issue. But it is not. I guess when it comes to wordless storytelling, I have been spoiled by the continuous mocap or suit acting of kaiju like Kong or Godzilla, and the comparatively abstract images require a bit more brainpower from me. So in these middle chapters of Redman's Red Fight, his opponents are Stegon, Birdon, Telesdon, Beacon, King Gesubira, King Mai Mai, and Redman Dark. Well, some of those are canonical foes from the original show. These fights are mainly from the imagination of Matt Frank, especially King Gesubira and Redman Dark, so there's no homework for understanding these chapters except for, of course, the Truman Show. Redman fights these monsters back to back as per usual, but again, there are some unexpected alliances. In this case, a brief team-up between Redman and some other monsters against Birdon. And also, two monsters fuse into one in order to better fight Redman in the ocean. I mistakenly referred to Gudon as Gubila last time, but this time Gubila is here and fuses with King Gesura to form King Gesubira. I kind of want to find a picture of that for you. Gubila has the big tusk, essentially a fat narwhal, while King Gessera is like a walking fish thing that loves cocoa beans. So you put those together, you put the texture of the skin of King Gessera onto Gubila, and you get King Gesubira. Finally, Redman stumbles upon proof that his entire life is fake, a television show meant to entertain others. That's the last issue in this volume. So I'm hoping you've already seen The Truman Show. I watched it for the first time to prepare for this video. But once I get into it, you'll see why the comparison is inevitably there. In The Truman Show, Jim Carrey's Truman Burbank has lived a fake life for about 30 years because the town of Sea Haven he lives in is a set. And his parents, wife, co-workers, friends are all actors, keeping him within the illusion because the 24-hour live-streamed show is absurdly popular and profitable in universe. The events of the film see him realizing this truth, testing the boundaries and rules of this reality, and taking steps to escape. There's a lot of symbolism and imagery in the film. The creator of the show views himself as a loving God and father to Truman, but he's designed a Garden of Eden scenario that Truman needs to leave. The creator is called Christoph, spelled like Christ of, and Truman, literally called True Man, follows from Christoph's philosophy about the nature of art and entertainment and the human experience. We open the film with Christoph monologuing. We've become bored with watching actors give us phony emotions. We are tired of pyrotechnics and special effects, while the world he inhabits is, in some respects, counterfeit. There's nothing fake about Truman himself. No scripts, no cue cards. It isn't always Shakespeare, but it's genuine. It's life. And he closes the film with a whole big monologue to Truman, telling him to stay, but also saying, you were real. That's what made you so good to watch. And also that this world that he designed for Truman is the same as the outside world, except better. The same issues will exist out there, but without the protections that he's given. Christoph's kind of the villain of the movie, but it's his philosophy that permeates this whole experience, and it's the philosophy of the narrator in Redman that guides what we are seeing and how we are viewing it. At the start of Red Fight 2 in this volume, the one against Birdon, here's the narrator's monologue. One might believe that the events of a life are easily controlled, that life is routine, that one can fall into a comfortable pattern of day-to-day events. You'd never think that chaos is simply a part of the routine of life. The trick is to adapt to chaotic elements, both big and small, and hope that one day your routine doesn't hold you back. Will our hero learn that today? Stay tuned, Red fans. And there's a few plot points that we can point straight away. As I just read, the narrator frames Redman's journey through truisms about sentient experience. The ocean fight against the fusion monster technically matches the climactic ocean battle that Truman braves to get to the exit of Sea Haven at the end of that movie. And in the final issue of this volume, he stumbles into an area where it becomes pretty clear to him that it's a television show. I think he sees himself on the TV monitor, reaching his hand out toward it. Here's some words. Not the entire monologue, but some words from the narrator at the end of the thing. We have a special guest, dear viewers, a surprise indeed, but a welcome one. The Raging Phantom, the warrior of Planet Red. The Kaiju Hunter himself, Redman. Please, please, settle down, everyone. Don't crowd our guest. We're very, very happy to have you here. You know we all love what you do, Redman-san. May we call you Red? So Red, I'm sure you're aware. We're all great fans of yours. Our friends at home have been watching you for what seems like ages. Granted, the audience may not be quite as big as used to, but the fine folks in the studio are still loyal. They'll never leave you, and neither will we. And then Redman Dark comes into the picture, sent by the narrator. We have a cool fight scene where you can't tell which Redman is which, but ultimately ours wins. And we close off on an image of the narrator's hand smashing some glass, because he's failed to control Redman here. Doesn't that just sound like something that you'd see in the Tokusatsu equivalent for the Truman Show? Now, okay, one question you would be very right to ask is, Joseph, why in the world are you comparing the middle volume of Redman's story to the beginning, middle, and end of Truman's? Indeed, most people that make this comparison only do so in passing, but if I am devoting a video to it, I need to justify the decision logically. In the Truman Show, technically what we watch is the end of Truman's story, the final episodes of his show. One of the big debates surrounding the film is when Truman figures it out, or if he already knew before the film begins. Like when he's gardening, is he digging the hole? I don't think so, but I think it's a fun little theory there. If nothing else, Redman knows by the end of this issue. If nothing else, Truman knows by the midpoint of his show, his movie. But that is the equivalent of that part of the story here. Okay, Joseph, maybe you're right that the Truman Show drops us in the middle of his story anyway, but why not wait until the end to make this comparison? Because I've not found an inexpensive way to get my hands on the third volume, I do not actually know how Redman's story ends. But if you think about it, that ambiguity also exists with Truman. After he braves through the storm Kristoff throws at him, and the creator tells Truman there's nothing out there for him, Truman goes through anyway, and we do not learn what kind of life he ends up living. The parallels of the narrator and Kristoff's climactic monologues following an ocean battle in this volume and movie are palpable, as well as the way Redman stumbles on the truth somewhat haphazardly. And if this makes sense, I genuinely get the sense that so far this volume is the Truman Show volume of the Redman story. If that makes sense. The homage is there, but the specifics only hold for this volume. You won't find them in the first volume. And this is a common enough practice in ongoing stories. Forgive the randomness of this example, but in the paranormal romance story Twilight, though Wuthering Heights is a constant allusion throughout the text, only Eclipse is based off of it. This might be a better example. Disney's The Lion King is partially based on Hamlet, but its sequel is partially based on Romeo and Juliet. And the film Lion King 1.5 can only be based on Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. You can't extend the Hamlet analogy past the first film. It simply would not be prudent to save this Truman Show cross-reference until the parallels would dry up. From what I have gleaned about the final volume of Redman The Kaiju Hunter, it is when Matt Frank decided to go really wild, introducing a new monster based on the original concept for Bemular, who fights Redman in defense of the innocent kaiju he slaughters. That doesn't fit with the Truman Show. It's worth mentioning that though I am confident this volume is at least partially inspired by the imagery and scenes from the Truman Show, there's limitations. Not every part of that film is relevant to this story. Redman has no friend like Marlin, no wife or father or mother, no fear of water that guides his growth through the story, and Redman notices a lot less discrepancies in the world before the confrontation with the narrator, so the story does not allow for the same fun scenes of our hero testing their world before the conclusion. In lieu, we get the kaiju fights, what you came to this story for. And I don't know how deep we want to read into all this symbolism here. He's Redman like Truman is Truman. Kristoff believes that Truman represents the true man, an entertainer that doesn't know he's acting. And Redman is also the same. Redman comes from planet Red. He also defines that, but this new planet is called Red Fight. So his actions, his stock dialogue of Red Fight defines this world the same way that the world revolves around Truman. Red Mon are the other inhabitants of this place, since the other kaiju seem to be invasive species. Redman's predominantly entertainment, but so is Truman. And yeah, I recommend this highly. It goes in and out of stock on Amazon, and these are pretty inexpensive. It's supposed to be under $20 for both of them. They just circle around $20 on Amazon. These are different production runs, as you can see from the different logos for Night Shining and Phase 6. At least one of those went out of, no longer exists anymore. So it's a lot difficult to find new printings of these. Very difficult to find any printings of the third volume. I will try my best for that. It's a story that seems to keep expanding in scope, though. Part of what I like a lot about it. Because it's part of the Ultra series, you'd better believe that there are, in fact, advertisements for toys at the end of this volume and other products you can buy. Specifically, it advertises the Redman Dark Sofubi. But yeah, I like it a lot. I'm not too crazy about the first volume's cover. I would have liked a more neutral one. And anyways, I'm just rambling at this point. Look into the Redman things if you want to. Watch the Truman Show, though, if you haven't already. It's a very good movie, and there's so much you can read into that movie, depending on what your perspective is. Thank you all for watching. Here at Plan9Crunch, every week we do a reads of some book. And we also have all sorts of other videos you might enjoy. We have a Facebook page and a conventional blog. Follow the links to those. Thank you all for watching. That's a wrap.